Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at PetBoxing on Twitter for boxing related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel, click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about the boxer card. We'll talk about Hughie Fury, we'll talk about Chris Eubank Jr, and we'll touch upon Savannah Marshall as well. We'll start off with Hughie Fury. This was an interesting display, that's how I would put it. His dad, Peter, of course, a world-class trainer who's done terrific work with Savannah, with Tyson Fury, with Hughie Fury himself over the years. He's a terrific trainer and he knows his boxing, right? He was asking Hughie for lighter work when he was on the outside. He wanted him to be patient, to essentially bedazzle him and then bring more powerful shots behind that. Carl Froch interpreted it somewhat differently. Carl Froch, of course, is also a legend of the British boxing game. He said it was a good performance, but once he settled down and let his shots go, it was a very good performance. Prior to that, there was too much pitter-patter stuff from the outside. So you can see a different interpretation between a bunch of people that know boxing, right? So what I'm going to do is offer my interpretation of this. Bearing in mind I am just a dude on YouTube, so I'm not arrogant enough to suggest that I'm right and Peter Fury is wrong, but I do lean more towards what Carl Froch was saying, and I'll explain why. I agree that you should be varying your power. Kind of like, in cricket or baseball, a bowler doesn't want to bowl consistently hard or fast balls, because what happens is the batter recognizes the pattern and the speed of the ball. You want to throw a slow ball, a ball that appears to be fast and then slows down, a ball with backspin, in other words, a ball with topspin appears not to be too fast and then it speeds up, a ball with curve on it, because you want to create inconsistency so that the batter cannot find a pattern to lock onto to take advantage. Well, Hughie Fury, and indeed people like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, have the capability of doing that. The latter two, Fury and Usyk, have mastered it. What Hughie Fury was doing last night, in my humble opinion, is being light with the lead hand far too often. So it was almost like, yes, okay, you're not throwing a hard ball all the time, but you're throwing a slow ball all the time. And that too provides a pattern that you can then work off. And what we saw, he does this thing where he'll be in a stance and he'll throw like a backhand and he's almost rolling, there's nothing on it. And then from that, he might change the angle and come with something hard. His backhand is very good. It's varied. It carries more pop than I think people give it credit for. He can throw to the body, to the head, hooks, uppercuts, straight shots. But the lead hand was consistently too light, in my humble opinion. Now, this has got nothing to do with him being incapable of throwing more powerful shots with that lead hand, because he's a switch hitter. And he does the same thing whether he's orthodox or southpaw. So this isn't a case of an undeveloped jab that, he just can't develop the power for the jab, so he's forced to fight that way. He just chooses not to throw it as, hard. Now, what I want to see him do is land something a little bit more significant early on, make the guy then wary of the feints, and then begin to vary the speed and the power and drop feints in there and keep a guy guessing. Instead, I felt as though he was just consistently doing light work with the lead hand, and you saw Christian Hammer start to ignore the lead hand. He realized this isn't really too much of a threat, and he started to just walk him down and throw hooks and over the top right hands, and he did have success. He landed quite a few. There was a nick under the left eye as well of Hughie Fury. Now, the Sky team weren't giving Hammer any credit, which, a lot of us are used to now when it comes to British commentary and American commentary, just commentary in general. The home fighter does seem to get the benefit of the doubt far too much, in my humble opinion. But to give the benefit of the doubt to the Sky commentary team, Hughie Fury has a great chin. And what could potentially have been the issue there is that Hammer, only on one occasion did it become quite evident that he was affecting Fury with a shot. He landed a shot that clearly affected Fury. That only happened on one occasion, as far as I could tell. So the rest of them, because they were sort of bouncing off him, and then he was exchanging with Hammer, it's possible, I guess, that they were overlooking the impact of these shots, right? But nonetheless, they were there. So imagine Christian Hammer wasn't Hammer. Imagine he was a guy with a monster right hook and a monster over the top right hand. Hughie Fury wouldn't have got away with what he got away with last night. Now, I know Peter Fury only gave him a 7.5 out of 10, right? So they're fully aware that there's room for improvement. But the fact that Peter was saying how he wanted him to throw light work more consistently, Hughie spoke about wanting to change the distance dynamic and go from long to close and change that up unpredictably. I agree with that bit. But I just want to see him being also unpredictable with the lead hand. Drop a pummeling jab in there every now and then. land that big powerful shot, make him think, do I just want to walk in and throw hooks? Because what happens if I walk onto a thudding jab? What happens, you know, and he does, when he's throwing that light work from the beginning, he'll also then rotate it with a hook, a wide hook. Drop that in there a little bit as well with a little bit more on it. You know, make the guy fear your lead hand and have to earn his way in. In my opinion, that's what cost Hughie Fury the Joseph Parker fight. The consistent light work with the lead hand, just this flicking backhand type jab that was often coming off of the gloves of Parker, meant that there wasn't much being scored when they were at range, and then Parker would come inside, they would exchange power shots, and then it was a case of who's outlanding who or who's affecting who more when it came to the power shots. Whereas if Hughie Fury had put a little bit more on that jab a bit more consistently, and I feel a similar thing happened with Pulev, who just decided, I'm going to start ignoring the Hughie Fury jab and walking through it. If you make a guy fearing to walk through it because he's going to get punished and pummeled, it could grow your success quite considerably. That's just my interpretation. I understand Peter Fury is a world-class trainer, and he may very well see things differently, and I'm sure he knows his son a lot better than anybody else, including me. So that's just my interpretation of it. His son, of course, is only 27 years old, young for a heavyweight. Like I said, he's got a whole bunch of great attributes. The lateral movement when he's at range is great. When he's inside and he plants his feet and he lets go of his shots, he can get a little bit square on, his head doesn't come off the center line. So he's easier to hit when he's throwing exchanges, when he's in exchanges, Hughie. But when he's on the outside, you have that sort of sideways momentum, and that's why I want to see it married with a pummeling jab, because you're unable to find that target. If he's then punishing you while you're trying to figure out the patterns too, well, then you've got a serious problem, right? So there's a lot of potential there. A heavyweight can peak at 35 years old, right? So imagine what he's going to be like in 8 years from now. So he's a guy that could seriously be in the mix in the future. So that's Hughie Fury. Let's move on to Chris Eubank Jr. Of course, I want to hear all your opinions on all these things. When it comes to Chris Eubank, you know, you can see the things that he's seeking to work on, and he is certainly trying to bring in the whole Roy Jones sort of element to his game. You can see, you know, at times he had the high guards and he's trying to almost like parry something down and come with a counter and catch you with something quick. You could see that. He was in there against an opponent who was much better than people gave him credit for. Okay, he's if he'd come in at not short notice, he had a couple of weeks or whatever, if he came in at full notice, Chris Eubank was in a proper fight last night, right? But you wouldn't expect that to be the case. Now, why was he in a proper fight? Is it because he wasn't doing what he's best at consistently and coming inside and seeking to let go of his hands? You know, in my humble opinion, Chris Eubank trying to be a boxer is not what suits him. You know, in the past, Hatman and I, and as you all know, you know, I've got so much respect for Hatman as a human being, as an analyst, right? But we can't all agree on everything. Like I just gave you an example of Carl Froch and Peter Fury, two men that know the sport that disagreed with each other. Hatman, I don't know what he says about this particular fight. I haven't seen anything he's put up yet today. But in the first showing he had under Roy Jones, he was suitably impressed with Eubank. Personally, I felt that Eubank's caught between two styles. And last night, that kind of reinforced it for me. I understand that he's seeking to be cuter with his entry point, but for me, I think he needs to work on being a pressure fighter. I don't mind him developing these skills as a side note, as an embellishment, but he has to find a way to cut off the ring against guys who are movers, like this guy who was a mover, who came in southpaw, who was landing the backhand quite consistently. You saw Eubank ducking at points to try and come under it, and the guy was able to change the trajectory of that shot, that backhand, and find the home for it, and then come around him. Now, if he's up against the southpaw and he's dipping in that manner forward, and he's sort of like putting himself in a situation where he's just coming low just to get away, and he's offering the shoulder up as an exit point without anything to stop that guy exiting, a top-level fighter with great footwork will continue to come around him consistently. If that was Eubank last night against a top-level fighter, he would have got seriously exposed, in my humble opinion. When he did start to let his hands go, when he did get close, that's when he looked like he was at his best. And you could see, you know, he was slowly chopping away at this guy. Now, like I said, this guy had short notice. So you don't know, again, would Eubank, this patient Eubank, would it have had the same sort of impact on a guy that was of a higher level? You know, we're going to see him be able to consistently chop down guys, or does he have to go to work earlier? For me, he has to work on cutting down the ring and getting close, slipping shots. For me, Eubank is a quintessential pressure fighter in terms of his skill set. Fantastic chin, great stamina, can can overwhelm you with a series of varied punches to the body and to the head. Even when he's up close and leaning right on you, he's got the upper body agility, and he uses his shoulders very well to create space, to create angles on the inside, to throw those uppercuts or hooks. He finds that space. Everything there fits for a pressure fighter. If he can marry all of that and force guys into a pocket, well, then Chris Eubank is going to give guys serious problems. So for me, it's about closing that range, that transition from outside to inside and cutting the ring off. That's what he needs to work on for me. But let me know what you think. I can see what he was trying to do, and I can see little elements, you know, these little sharp shooting shots from the outside, jumping in, landing to the body with lead power shots. That's great. That worked for him last night in points, right? But against the elite, I still see a lot of holes there. And I want to see him, I believe he's a fighter rather than a boxer. And I'm not so sure that this style suits him. I could be wrong. Let me know what you think. Moving on finally to Savannah Marshall. Listen, I'm not a connoisseur when it comes to women's boxing. People are aware of this. So this comment that I'm going to make now is, I guess you could say shallow. You know, there's not much depth to it. But it was one of the best female performances I've ever seen. You saw this opponent come out, really go at her, try to put it on her physically, aggressively, and you saw a calmness there. She was catching shots, countering with short counters. The power was there, where she was letting go of the power when the opponent wasn't as dynamic in terms of the forward momentum. In the second round, when the opponent was really trying to hunt her down, there was a constant rotation. When she was stepping back in a circle. And it meant that that forward momentum was cut off. You couldn't just force her back and jump into her. You have to have a little reset with your angle, which stops the opponent running you down. It's so skillful. You know, forget physicality. You know, I know Clarissa Shields has been talking about how she'll knock out Golovkin and Keith Thurman and Porter, and that's just ridiculous. So forget the physicality aspect of it. But from a sheer skill set perspective, her understanding of the sport, that's a mental thing, right? That's an intellectual thing. That's not physical. There's no difference when it comes to the intellectual ability to understand the fight game. There's no difference between men and women. In the intellectual aspect, she could really understand the fight game. She was superb. And yeah, I was just very, very impressed. Peter Fury's done a terrific job with her. I would have to carry out film study before I give a real prediction between Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields. It would be unfair for me, like I said, because I'm not exactly a connoisseur. I don't follow the women's game like I do the men's game. But if it's announced, it's one that has piqued my interest, shall we say. And I will do some analysis. Let me know what you think, guys, of everything that we've chatted about. There was a great atmosphere as well last night. Yeah, chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.